To your Ixion point, if I can interject, like one of my nitpicks I
Sure.
did have was like there was a lot of Dune terminology, sort of like fan service dropping in this episode. Someone casually said Mentat at one point. Later in Minutia, we're going to talk about Conley, which I think was actually used quite well. But this was an opportunity to show us an Ixion on screen
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
and to make it memorable.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we
well, they
didn't
did.
do any of that.
They
You know,
fucking did that. They made it.
so that
They
that to
made it
me
memorably
that
bad.
like fan service is a whole separate discussion that we could have at some point. But like to me, there are two extremes of bad fan service. One is like we've made our story all about this nostalgic fan service thing so
Sure.
that
Yeah.
people like it because that's what they like about Star Wars. So blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yoda's got to be in it. On the other extreme, you have like what's happening in this show where it's well, we have to say this because this is Dune. So we got to
Mm.
just say Ixion at some point in this episode. We got to just name drop Mentat at some point. And that is to me is also bad fan service. You're just checking a box saying like, well, because this is a Star Wars property, somebody needs to mention whatever midi chlorians, even
Yeah.
if it doesn't matter to this plot at all. And like good fan service sits somewhere in the middle,
Somewhere in the middle.
where
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
important to your. I think the Conley thing in this episode is actually an example of like pretty good fan service. Like
That's how it works. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's somewhere in the middle where like it's not so critical to your plot that the whole fucking show is about this one fan servicey thing, but it's also not a throwaway line just to check a box. It's relevant to that plot point in that moment. We say the thing, fans go, "Oh my God, Conley, I know what that is." It's important to that context, and then we move on from it and we don't dwell. So I think Conley was used correctly, and when it comes to like fan service and nods toward
Yeah.
an established universe and world
Right.
building. I think like this Ixion example was a huge letdown. I think the throwaway Mentat line made me roll my eyes. It felt like there were a few examples of that throughout this
I
episode.
I will say I think the challenge is if they don't have any of it, or if that's just happening in the background, right? We then start feeling like it's not Dune. So there is a balancing act because you need the Dune terminology is going to be there, and our mentats have calculated this probability is why we think you should bring this up is not an inaccurate thing for someone to say in the Dune universe. So I think there's a balancing act.